Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the AEW Dynamite review. Dynamite tonight was from the Curtis Culwell Center in Garland, Texas, and this was the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite. And this was a awesome show tonight. Just a great show. We had an amazing, fantastic opening match, where it was for the AEW World Championship, where Hangman and Page defend the title against BRYAN Danielson. And what a match that was. That match went on for an hour, and it had 4 commercial breaks in between during the match. And it was just fantastic. Great match, good television. And we also saw Hikaroshida versus Serena Deep, Warlow versus Matt Seidel, and in the main event for the Dynamite Diamond Ring, it was MJF versus Dante Martin. Now, if you remember in the Dynamite Diamond Ring Battle Royal from last week, MJF and Dante Martin were the last two in there, so they got to face off tonight. But overall, Dynamite Winter is Coming was a great show tonight. Awesome show. But before I start the review, if you guys haven't checked out my previous videos, the Monday Night Raw review is up. What a shit show was on Monday. So that review is up. And also the video that I did last night, where I did the unboxing of the Spider-Man No Way Home box from Time Capsule Bag. That video is also up. So check out those 2 videos if you guys haven't seen them. It's up on my channel. But let's get right into the review of this awesome show tonight. So, Dynamite Winter is Coming opened up with Hangman and Page versus BRYAN Danielson for the AEW World Championship. And this match, like I said, went on for an hour. This was a pay-per-view quality match. It was just absolutely great. Both Hangman and Page and BRYAN Danielson, both of these guys went to war in this match. They worked really well together here. There was parts of the match where, it was a little slow, but it picked up as the match went on. And it was just great. It was a great match. In my opinion, it's possibly one of the greatest matches in AEW's short history so far. And I gotta say, this topped Omega and BRYAN, in my opinion. The match started off with both Page and BRYAN tying up. BRYAN ended up getting out of it, and he was shown doing jumping jacks. So Hangman and Page ended up taking down BRYAN, and we had Page end up dropping BRYAN with a shoulder tackle. He tried to go for a chop to BRYAN, but BRYAN avoided it. Started doing some jumping jacks again. So he was just trying to show off and get into Page's head. So BRYAN ended up using the ropes to stop some offense to Page. So we had Page and BRYAN. At this point in the match, they were doing leg sweeps. They were trading leg sweeps until Page ended up avoiding a leg sweep. He ended up decking BRYAN with a kick. BRYAN then ended up extending his hand, and Page didn't even want to shake it. He had no desire to shake BRYAN's hand. So then BRYAN then looked to leap over Page. He ended up getting caught by Page. Page ended up slamming him down to the mat. So BRYAN ended up going for the ankle pick. He ended up working on Page. BRYAN then ended up blocking in the Dragon Sleeper on Page, but Page was able to get out of it. So Bryan then came back, ended up nailing Page with some chops. He delivered a headbutt, and Page ended up running through another chop from Bryan. And then he came back, delivered a chop of his own to Bryan. So Page, at this point, ended up firing with 10 punches to Bryan while Bryan was in the corner. Bryan then, once again, went for Page's ankle, ends up attacking it. Bryan then ends up pounding Page, and Bryan ends up taking control. Bryan ends up sending Page to the apron, but Page ended up aiming for a buckshot lariat, which he was only to be knocked out to the floor by Bryan. Bryan was looking to dive out of the ring, but he ended up getting a boot to his face by Page. So Page then launched himself over the top rope. He took out Bryan on the floor. So both guys went back inside the ring. Page ended up leaping in from the top rope. He got caught by Bryan in midair, and Bryan delivered a strike to Page's chest. So Bryan then ended up hanging Page on the second rope. He ended up down diving his knee into the back of Page's head. So he went for the cover. Page ended up kicking out too. So Bryan ended up following that up with a kick to Page's ribs. So Page ended up getting back up. He ended up dropping Bryan onto his back. And he followed that up with some elbow strikes to Bryan in the corner. So Bryan ended up hitting the ropes. He got back up. He hit the ropes. He was hoping to deliver a crossbody, but Page ended up catching Bryan, and he delivered a fallaway slam to Bryan. Page then ended up dropping Bryan on the top rope, and he springboarded into the lariat, which sent Bryan outside of the ring. And then Page followed that up with a top suicida, which looked awesome. So Page then ended up hitting a moonsault from the top turnbuckle from the outside onto Bryan, which was a very nice looking moonsault. So both guys were back in the ring. Bryan almost catched Page with a roll-up, but Page ended up kicking out. And Page then delivered the Death Valley driver onto Bryan, which was cool. So he went for the cover. Bryan kicked out. So Page then set Bryan to the rope, and he ended up slipping underneath Page. Bryan ended up slipping underneath him. And he started delivering some elbow strikes to the back of Page's head. Page then came back, delivered a strike of his own. And we had Bryan end up looking to go for a quick roll-up, but Page ended up kicking out. Later on, Page was trying to look to go for the buckshot lariat, but Bryan ended up rolling out of the ring. There was a point where Bryan ended up hitting some drop kicks in the corner, and when Bryan ended up hitting a third attempt for the drop kick, Page then countered that and delivered a pop-up powerbomb to Bryan. Went for the cover, which Bryan kicked out at 2. So we have Bryan attacking Page. He ended up slamming Page into the ring post several times. Bryan was pulling at Page's arms, which busted Page wide open. He was bleeding from the side of his head here. So we had the referee and one of the doctors out there check on Page. And this was during the picture-in-picture on TNT, if you're watching it on TNT. We see Bryan, he was doing, jumping jacks, and he starts flipping off the fans. He gave the fans the bird. So I thought that was pretty funny during the picture-in-picture. So Page was trying to get back into the ring. Bryan ended up nailing another kick. He followed up with a flying knee to the outside. He ended up attacking, the busted open area of Page's head on the side over here. He ended up wiping Page's blood on his chest. and there was a little blood on Bryan's shoulders, which was Page's blood. So Bryan then ended up sending Page on the ring apron once again, ended up nailing him with a knee to the head, which he then followed up by wrapping Page's arm around the ring post. So Bryan ended up driving Page's head into the second turnbuckle, and then we had Bryan end up going for another knee strike. Page ended up catching Bryan, looked to go for the fallaway slam. So Bryan then reversed that, and it allowed him to hit a German suplex. And so then Bryan went into the cow mutilation, which Page ended up getting to the ropes, breaking up the hold. So Bryan followed up with some kicks. Page ended up avoiding the kicks. He ended up booting the ring post. Page ended up driving Bryan knee first into the post. And there was the exposed guardrail. He ended up trapping Bryan's legs between the bars, and then he booted it. So Page ended up setting in the figure 4 leg lock, and he was able to roll to the ropes. So then Bryan ended up setting in the figure 4 leg lock, and Page was able to roll to the ropes, and then Page ended up wrapping Bryan's leg around the ring post, and both guys were just going back and forth, delivering some punches. Page then connected with a dragon screw on Bryan from the turnbuckle, and he then hit another one on the mat, and they were just going back and forth here. Bryan ended up trying a pinfall after he reversed a powerbomb, and Page ended up kicking out. So Bryan locked in the triangle choke on Page. Page ended up getting to the ropes, but Page ended up responding with a tombstone pile driver to Bryan, which was cool. So Page ended up going for the cover. Bryan ended up kicking out, and the crowd was just chanting, "This is awesome" here. You know, they were loving what they were seeing. We had Bryan end up delivering a suplex to Page, and Bryan went for the cover. Page ended up kicking out. So both Bryan and Page went up to the top rope, and both guys delivered a superplex from the top, and Bryan ended up going for the pin, and he didn't get the pin. So Bryan ended up following that up. He was delivering some elbow strikes to Page. Bryan was looking to go for the pile driver on the ring apron to Page, but he responded with the dead eye from Page. So then we had Bryan exposing the floor. This was during the picture-in-picture. He was exposing the floor. He ended up dropping Page down with the DDT. So we had Page fighting back. He ended up delivering a German suplex to Bryan. And there was a point where both Bryan and Page were at the top turnbuckle. So Bryan was looking to send Page flying off the top turnbuckle, and Page landed on his feet, which that was an awesome spot there. So when Page ended up landing on his feet, he came back and delivered a lariat to Bryan, which turned Bryan inside out, took Bryan off his feet. So that was a great spot there in the match. So Bryan and Page, at this point, they were trading some strikes, and we had Bryan end up looking to go for another German suplex, but Page ended up reversing it, and he then hit another lariat, but Bryan ended up nailing a kick to Page's head. So then Bryan ended up hitting another kick to Page, which Bryan went for the cover. Page ended up kicking out. So we had Bryan looking to hit the running knees on Page. Page reversed it with a dead eye, and he went for the cover, and Bryan kicked out. So at the end of the match, we had Page ended up launching Bryan over the top rope. And he ended up coming back in. He delivered a lariat. And we had a point where Page was going to go for the buckshot lariat, but Bryan ended up reversing that and put Page in the label lock, which Page ended up finding out. And that's when he launched Bryan over the top rope. But Bryan ended up coming back in, only to be hit by the lariat by Page. So then Page ended up connecting with another buckshot lariat, which took Bryan down. And then the bell ended up ringing. So the match ended in a draw, because it was a 60-minute time limit match. The match went on for an hour. But it ended in a draw. And no doubt there is going to be a rematch between both these guys. And I think that's going to be coming at Battle of the Belts. So at Battle of the Belts, we're going to get the rematch with Page and Bryan. So there's your rematch for at Battle of the Belts. But overall, this was a fantastic match. Great match between Page and Bryan. Both guys just delivered in this match. It was a pay-per-view quality match, even though it had 4 commercial breaks, done for, in between certain parts of the match. But overall, it was entertaining. It's a little bit slow at parts, but picked up really well as the match went on. But both guys delivered. Absolutely great match. In my opinion, one of the greatest matches so far in AEW history. Or one of the greatest matches on Dynamite so far. But just very enjoyable match. Like I said, even topped Omega and Bryan. The Omega and Bryan match. Awesome match. And it was good television. And then we had the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, and Bobby Fish backstage. Adam Cole ended up questioning when the best friends will learn to leave them alone, after they left them laying last week on Rampage. Bobby Fish then went on to say that every time they see the best friends, they end up dividing and conquering. So the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick, end up suggesting that there will be a 8-man tag for Rampage this Friday. And they also claim that they will also end Sue's career. Sue Trent's mom. So then Adam Cole ended up teasing a surprise for next week. And we all know what that surprise is. Maybe we're going to see Kyle O'Reilly next week on Dynamite, which it's going to be called Holiday Bash. That's going to be the name for Dynamite next week. So we may be seeing Kyle O'Reilly next week on Dynamite, because there's all this talk. Kyle O'Reilly's contract, came up with WWE, with NXT, and all this talk about him going to AEW. A lot of people, including me, thought that he would debut tonight. But unfortunately, he didn't. And also, a lot of people thought that Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt, was going to show up tonight. Unfortunately, he didn't. And I believed it, along with the people that said, oh yeah, maybe Wyndham, Bray Wyatt is going to show up tonight. Fortunately, didn't show up. So I think next week, with Adam Cole, with this teasing a surprise, we're going to get Kyle O'Reilly possibly debuting next week on Dynamite. And then we had Warlow versus Matt Seidel. This was a squash match. Sean Spears was also out there. The match started off with Warlow. He was pushing Matt Seidel across the ring. Warlow was delivering some kicks to Matt Seidel. So we had Warlow end up catching Matt Seidel in midair. He ended up planting Seidel to the mat. Warlow ended up nailing a huge powerbomb to Sydal. Shawn Spears then got on the mic. He ended up telling Warlow to just pin Sydal. So Warlow ended up going for the pin, and there you go. Warlow ended up winning. Post-match, Shawn Spears ended up attacking Matt Seidel with a chair. MJF then ended up calling Shawn Spears, and he ended up telling Warlow that MJF wants him to get some champagne for after his match with Dante Martin later on in the night. So, looks like, this could be set up for a Warlow face turn. So, I think that's what they're going to be setting this up for. I think Warlow's going to be breaking away from MJF because Shawn Spears ended up saying right there that MJF ended up telling Warlow to get him some champagne. So I think Warlow's not going to take it anymore. He's going to be away from MJF, and this is going to lead to Warlow's babyface turn. Well, overall, this was a squash match between Warlow and Matt Seidel. Then we had a vignette from Malachi Black. Malachi Black was shown inside a house, and he had a black around his eye. So Malachi was talking about the lessons that the house has taught him. And he was also shown spraying black mist on someone. And this person ended up throwing up black blood. And we had Malachi Black end up whispering, "Now you're so much more than a king." So, pretty much that was basically that. But pretty cool vignette from Malachi Black. And then we had Serena Deeb versus Hikaroshida. This was a decent women's match here. Serena Deeb ended up coming out first, and then Hikaroshida. And before Hikaroshida can even come into the ring, Serena Deeb ended up attacking her. Deeb ended up launching Hikaroshida into her kendo stick, and they both got into the ring, and they were attacking each other. Hikaroshida ended up throwing some strikes in the corner to Deeb, and then she ended up hitting a drop kick. Serena Deeb got back up, and she took down Hikaroshida, and she was working on Hakaroshida's knee until Shida ended up grabbing the rope. Serena Deeb ended up attacking the knee still of Hikaroshida. Deeb ended up locking in the figure four with the ring post to Hikaroshida. She was pressuring on Hakaroshida's knee against the ring post. So Deeb stayed in control of the match, and she ended up delivering a boot across Hakaroshida's face, and she ended up locking in another submission on Hikaroshida to Hakaroshida's knee. So Hikaroshida got back up. She got back in control of the match. She delivered a delayed vertical suplex to Serena Deeb. She ended up heading to the top rope. We had Hikaroshida, just on top of there, and Serena Deeb ended up pushing her down off the top. She was taking too much time, Hikaroshida. Deeb ended up exposing the turnbuckle, and she ended up dropping Hikaroshida neck first onto the turnbuckle, onto the steel turnbuckle. So then Deeb ended up connecting with the powerbomb. So she ended up going for the cover, and Hikaroshida ended up kicking out. So we had Deeb end up delivering some knee strikes to Hikaroshida. And Hikaroshida ended up reversing a Falcon Arrow because Deeb ended up going for a neck breaker. So Hikaroshida ended up reversing that with a Falcon Arrow, which looked nice. And Hikaroshida followed up the Falcon Arrow with a axe kick. And we had both Deeb and Hikaru go for, roll-ups. And Deeb ended up locking in another submission on Hikaru's knee. So at the end of the match, we had Hikaru end up getting the win, a pinfall on Serena Deep. So there you go. Hikaru ended up winning the match. Overall, this was a decent women's match. I thought Serena Deep and Hikaru worked pretty well here. But it was a decent match. And then we had Tony Schiavone. Tony Schiavone was with the Varsity Blondes, Griff Garrison, and Brian Pillman Jr. Julia Hart wasn't there because, remember last week, Malachi Black ended up spraying the black mist onto Julia Hart, blinding her. But Malachi Black ended up botching that because, when Julia Hart was screaming and selling the black mist, she had her face, cover like that, but when she moved her, hand like that, you hardly saw any black mist on her face. So you didn't really see it. So the Varsity Blondes, Griff Garrison, Brian Pillman Jr., they ended up pointing out that Julia Hart isn't with them. Griff Garrison ended up saying that he is going to fight Black, and Brian Pillman Jr. then questioned that. So he ended up telling Garrison to calm down. So it's led to Garrison and Pillman arguing. Garrison ended up promising that next week he will break the jaw of Malachi Black. So there you go. But that's for next week. But Malachi Black, of course, he's defeating Griff Garrison. Griff Garrison has no chance against Malachi Black just by how big that they're building Malachi Black. So Griff Garrison will be taking a loss next week. And then we had Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston ended up saying that he's tired of the situation between 2.0 and Daniel Garcia. So he ended up saying, I know Moxley isn't here, but I'm teaming up with Penta, Rey Fenix, Santana, and Ortiz. And he ended up saying that he doesn't care who Daniel Garcia and 2.0 pick as their partners. So we're going to be getting that. So that was what Eddie Kingston had to say. Main event. MJF versus Dante Martin for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And if you remember last week in the Battle Royal, in the Dynamite Diamond Ring Battle Royal, it was MJF and Dante Martin as the last two. So they end up facing off tonight. And the winner, of course, gets the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And this was a good matchup here. MJF ended up coming out. He got boos from the crowd. He got on the mic. And he ended up calling Garland, Texas, a dump. He wanted to say that the second Punk got nervous last week, he said, the Islanders suck for 10 minutes. MJF ended up saying that Punk doesn't realize how having an undefeated streak against underwhelming talent made him a title threat. He ended up saying that he thought it made Punk the new Ryback. So yeah, he threw out Ryback's name there. So MJF then told Dante Martin that he doesn't give a damn about young talent, and that Dante will find that out. So the match got underway. MJF did a side headlock on Martin. Dante Martin ended up coming back up. He slapped MJF several times. He ended up hitting the drop kick to MJF. Dante then went for the 450 knee drop, which he went for the cover. MJF ended up kicking out. So Dante was looking to continue the momentum on MJF, but MJF rolled to the outside, Dante Martin ended up sent up to dive outside on MJF, but MJF ended up moving out of the way. So both guys were in the ring. Dante Martin was looking to leap on the top rope, and he was pushed to the floor by MJF. And Dante Martin ended up slamming into the barricade. MJF followed that up. He ended up sending Dante Martin crashing into the guardrail. So then both guys went back to the ring. MJF was shown biting at Dante Martin's thumb. So MJF then tried to sneak a pinfall with his feet on the ropes, but the official ended up seeing that. So Dante Martin ended up looking to go for the nosedive on MJF. This was later on in the match. And MJF ended up getting away. And we had Dante Martin end up delivering some strikes on MJF in the corner. And there was a point in the match where MJF looked to go to the outside. And Dante Martin ended up hitting a nice, awesome-looking shooting star press from the top rope onto MJF. That was a great shooting star press from Dante Martin. So Dante Martin was looking to go for several pinfalls, but MJF ended up continuing to kick out. So there was a point where Dante Martin ended up connecting with the nosedive, and Ricky Starks ended up appearing. Ricky Starks ended up putting MJF's foot on the rope because Dante Martin went for the cover. So after, Dante was distracted by Ricky Starks, MJF ended up locking in the Salt of the Earth, and that was that. MJF ended up winning the match. Post-match, FTR, Dax Harwood, Cash Wheeler ended up making their way down, and they both were celebrating with MJF, and the lights go down in the arena. And what I thought here was, you finally seeing Wyndham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt here? Are we going to see Kyle O'Reilly debut? But unfortunately, I said that wasn't what happened. We did not get Wyndham. We did not get Kyle O'Reilly. So the lights end up coming back on, and Sting and Darby Allin were in there. So Sting and Darby Allin were brawling with FTR. MJF was shown delivering a low blow to Sting. And so FTR and MJF end up being down on Sting and Darby Allin. And as the crowd was chanting for Punk to come out, he did. CM Punk came out there. He had a bat in hand. So he came down to the ring, and we had MJF and FTR end up getting out of the ring, wanted nothing to do with Punk with the bat. Punk then got on the mic, and he ended up saying to MJF that if MJF doesn't want to do it one-on-one, then he can bring his friends, because he is going to bring his own, and that MJF can deal with that. So that was that. That was a little what Punk had to say. But overall, it was a good match between MJF and Dante Martin for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And I called it last week. I'm like, MJF is going to win again the Dynamite Diamond Ring. So there you go. Called it. But that was Dynamite tonight. Overall, awesome show. It was a great show tonight. The Paige and Bryan matchup was fantastic. Just good television. But anyways, that's it for my review of tonight's Dynamite. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all later.